The reason I'm recording it is that if anybody can't make the training, I'm hoping to share the recording with folks. I'm going to give a little introduction on the project, talk about some functional class basics. I'm sure most of you are familiar with functional classification, so it's just going to be a high-level discussion for those of you who might be new to this concept, and then I'll provide some other resources that take a deeper dive into functional class if you have questions about that. Let's see, let me let these other folks in. I'm going to move on to talking about best practices that you might want to focus on for conducting your review. And then I'll give a little demo of the web map application we're going to use to conduct the review. And then I'd appreciate your feedback on the web map application or anything else that I cover. I'm open to constructive criticism. This year we're doing things a little differently using the web map. So again, this is a learning process for us and we welcome your feedback on that. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. You should be seeing my first PowerPoint slides. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Okay, so every 10 years we conduct the review of the functional classification network for all of our roads following the decennial census. And we just wrapped up reviewing the urban area boundaries and adjusting those. We got our official approval from FHWA on September 23rd of this year. I also want to point out we have a project website with lots of good information. Let me share that real quickly. So most of you are familiar with this if you've worked on the urban area boundary review project with us. There are going to be some updates to this website. Currently, this launch button still goes to the urban area review web map. We're going to replace this with the functional class review web map that I'll be showing off, and we're going to update some additional information here, like the FAQs. So once that's finalized and updated, I'll send you all the links so you have that available. Also, I'll be sending out this PowerPoint as well after this meeting, so you guys will have all the URLs and links and all that good stuff. Okay, go back to my PowerPoint. So the timeline for this project, we're going to kick off the review on November 1st. That's when we'll start receiving all of your stakeholder input, and that will run through August 31st of next year, where we'll stop taking input from our stakeholders and prepare the data to submit to FHWA in September of 2025. At that point, we'll be submitting a GIS data set to FHWA, and they'll be reviewing that and providing feedback to us on that. If we have any issues crop up after their review, we'll be sure to reach out to you all and get your feedback before making any changes to finalize that. And in December of next year, at the end of December, we're hoping to adopt all those changes and wrap up the project. Okay, so let me move on to some functional class basics. Again, this will be a really high-level discussion. I know, like I said, a lot of you are already familiar with this concept. So functional classification, it defines the role that a roadway plays in serving the flow of traffic in the overall network. And its intent is to help planners and engineers channel transportation movements efficiently and cost effectively. And in this image here, we kind of try to explain the basic concept of functional class. So you've got functional class 1 interstates at the top there, and it's characterized by higher speeds and high mobility and full access control. And as you go on down the line, functional class 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 down at the bottom, those local routes, those functional class 7 routes, those are characterized by lower speeds, lower mobility, and also no access control. So that's kind of the spectrum of the different functional classifications. So how is functional class used? And I'll be honest, I stole this from NOACA, so thank you, NOACA, for your website on functional class. I thought it summarized how functional class is used in a nice way. So it's one of the measures of a route's transportation importance in project selection and program management. It also helps determine maintenance allocations and data collection needs. And it helps set criteria for roadway features, which I'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. And it also identifies roads that are eligible for federal funds. So kind of to drill down on those last two bullet points, ODOT has a location and design manual, and within that manual, there's a section on functional classification. And depending on certain functional classifications, it may determine design requirements like maximum grades or lane width or shoulder types and widths or intersection design. Also, the impact on federal aid eligibility is a big one. So in this chart, you can see that those functional classifications that are shaded in that pink color are eligible for federal aid. So on the left, you can see in rural areas, roads that have a functional classification of 1 through 5 are eligible for federal funds. And then over on the urban side, roads that are classified as a functional class 1 through 6 are eligible for federal aid funding. So that's important to remember as you conduct your review. As I mentioned, there's lots of good resources out there. Today, we're just going to talk high level about functional class, but if you want to learn more, I recommend checking out FHWA's document. It's called the Highway Functional Classification Concepts, Criteria, and Procedures. And I've included the link to the updated document. They updated it just a little bit last year in 2023. That's got a lot of good detailed information. It outlines each individual functional classification. It provides tips and tricks for assigning functional class to roadways and that sort of thing, and for conducting a review as well. And I'd also like to point out there's an FHW training video out there. I included the YouTube link in this PowerPoint. It's also on our project website. And it's kind of like, it's a good summary of the document from FHWA. It's a little less than an hour. It's about 50 minutes long. I thought it was useful. It was given by Joe Hausman, who's the main contact at FHWA for functional class, and he conducted it at Florida DOT back in 2022. And then I also want to mention that we have created a story map. My colleague Taylor Wilson, who's on the functional class committee here at ODOT, put this together for us, and I think it's really useful. Let me see if I can expand this a little bit. So it kind of takes that big document and summarize it in an easy to digest format. So if you scroll through the story map, you can see that it's got a definition of functional class. It moves on down to talk about the federal aid network, some considerations to take into account when you're assigning functional class for roads, other important considerations, some guidelines from FHWA. It talks about how the census influences functional class 2, and then it goes through each individual functional class and it gives a definition. It talks about characteristics of that functional class, some examples and some images, so you can just click through to see more information about that. And then at the very end, after it goes through each functional classification, it's got a link to our web map application that I'll talk about a little bit later. So those are 3, I think, good resources if you need more information on functional class. And also, obviously, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. We're happy to talk with you, set up a meeting, or email back and forth too. All right, so just kind of a quick overview of the different functional classifications. I've grouped them into 3 main groups here, starting with arterials. So that would include functional classes 1 through 4. So you've got your interstates, your other freeways and expressways, your other principal arterials, and your minor arterials. And some of the big characteristics of those arterial roadways are that they have high mobility. They have full access control, and they mainly are concerned with long distance trips or involve long distance trips. Moving on down then to the second grouping of collectors, you've got your major collectors and your minor collectors. As the name would imply, they collect vehicles from local roads and connect them to neighborhoods, businesses, and arterial roadways. And they're usually no access control for those types of routes. And then the final functional class would be 7, local roads. There's no access control for those routes, lower mobility, and lower speeds. And in this example from Toledo, you can see we're showing Jackman Road and Burden Avenue. And those roads are major collectors, but in between them in that neighborhood area, you can see all those functional class 7 routes that serve that neighborhood. Okay, moving right along then, I want to cover some review best practices. So probably a lot of you are familiar with these summary tables from the FHWA document that I mentioned earlier. They're tables 3-5 and 3-6. And what this tries to do is it tries to compress a lot of that information in that manual into a couple of summary tables. So it organizes the different functional classification, and then you can see the associated characteristics for each of those functional classifications. So at the top, you've got your typical like physical characteristics, your lane width, shoulder widths. You also have some AADT. You'll notice those are broken down by rural and urban areas. And then moving on down, you'll see some suggested mileage and VMT extents. And you'll notice for those extents, for those like percentage ranges, that they're broken down by either, it's determined whether you're a rural state or an urban state. Those fluctuate a little bit depending on whether you're, considered an urban state or rural state, excuse me. So for Ohio, according to the last census information that we received, we show that 83% of Ohioans live in urban areas, so we're considered an urban state. Let's see. Oh, I did have a call with Joe Hausman before we kicked off this project, and I asked him if FHWA had any plans to update these ranges and characteristics, just because these ranges are based on data collected in 2011. Mr. Hausman said, no, we don't plan on updating this anytime soon. So for this review, we're still going to refer to this table as kind of a guide on how to classify roads into different functional classifications. And again, this is a guide. It's not a requirement that you're assigning a route. You think it fits into a minor arterial. You might fit all the criteria except for one. That's okay. These aren't hard and fast rules. These are guidelines. And then table 3-6 is just a continuation. It looks at major and minor collectors and local routes. I do want to point out that the information for urban major and minor collectors is approximate, and that's because back in 2011, when they were putting this information together, there were only a small number of states reporting data for these functional classifications in urban areas. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I wanted to kind of take a look and see where we're at right now with our mileage ranges. These tables are based on the latest urban area boundaries that we adopted back in September. We have incorporated those new urban areas into our GIS database. And so this is reflecting those latest urban and rural classifications and the latest functional class that we have in our system. And you'll see that the percentage that are highlighted in pink are outside the recommended ranges from FHWA. So you'll notice in the rural table there at the top, we have our functional class 1 routes. Our mileage range is at 0.86%, and that's just shy of the 1 to 2% range that FHWA recommends. And then for the urban areas, you can see we're just a little bit over for functional class 3 routes. But then you'll notice for our functional class 6 routes, we are way, way under the target range. In our conversation that we had with Joe Hausman, he used to work at Ohio DOT and was involved in this process of reviewing functional class, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago maybe. And he is familiar with the fact that our functional class 6 routes in urban areas are quite low. I asked him, is it a deal breaker if we don't fall exactly within these ranges? He said, no, obviously FHWA, these are recommendations and showing where most states fall on those scales, on those ranges. So, we'd like to try to get closer to the target range for functional class 6 in urban areas, but it's not as if he's not familiar with our situation, and if we have a justification for why this is, it's not going to be a deal breaker. We're going to try to update these numbers as we go. I had a colleague here at ODOT, Ethan Pointer, put together a dashboard with Power BI, and that's pulling our data from our latest and greatest sources. So that will be updated, and I'll share that. This isn't publicly available. This is an internal tool, but I will try to share with that with you periodically as we go through this process to kind of see where we're at, kind of touch base and see where we're at as we go. Okay, let me get back to my PowerPoint. Any questions so far? Any comments, especially about these mileage ranges? If so, feel free to, raise your hand or type in the chat if you have any questions or comments on that. Okay. Regarding stakeholder review procedures, I know NOACA has a formal procedure in place for reviewing functional class, but most folks, most MPOs, RTPOs don't have a formal process in place. Obviously not a formal procedure isn't required by FHWA or ODOT. But if you want to check out that procedure that NOACA has developed, I've included the link to their webpage. Also, ODOT, like I said at the beginning, ODOT is happy to provide any additional data or information that you might need to conduct your review. So just reach out to us anytime if you have questions. All right, so wrapping up here with my presentation, some of the issues to look for when you're conducting your review. One of the big ones is connectivity. So according to the FHWA document, with rare exceptions, any road that's classified above a local or a functional class 7, it must start and stop with a road that is the same or higher functional class. So for example, a minor arterial must terminate with another minor arterial or a principal arterial, but not end with a major collector. And I'll show some examples of this graphically too. So connectivity is a big thing to look for. So you might have new roads come onto the system that need a new functional classification. You might have roadway changes, intersection mismatches where you've got functional class that maybe an interchange has been improved and the flow of traffic has kind of been rerouted. So you might want to look at the connectivity of those functional classifications. Also, I know that Jerry, when he did this process 10 years ago, some of the changes he did involved where a functional class would change at a county line. So we want to kind of look for those county mismatches and also mismatches between states, if at all possible. If you're working with other states in your area, kind of look out for that too. Another thing you'll want to look for are new traffic generators. So, we did this as part of the urban area boundary review. You're going to look for if a new industrial park has been built or a big new subdivision, a new school that's impacting the amount of traffic on a route. You might want to think about updating the functional class for that too. And then of course those urban and rural changes. So we did just update all of our urban area boundaries. So, when you're thinking about a minor collector route in a rural area, the recommended AADT range is typically between 150 and 1100. But that same functional class 6 route in an urban area is going to have much higher traffic. So that would be 1100 to 6300, according to FHWA, that table we looked at earlier. So, yeah, so in the document that I mentioned, they note that the most important impact the urban boundaries have on road project funding is on minor collectors. So for urban minor collectors, they're eligible for federal aid, as we saw in that chart in the earlier slide. So if road work is required for a rural minor collector, it's recommended that planners take a look at that road and determine if it's eligible to be reclassified to a higher functional class, such as a major collector. So these are things to keep in mind. If you have roads that have gone from urban to rural or rural to urban, you might want to take a look at those, especially for the minor collector category. Okay, the final thing I wanted to talk about before I talk about the review procedure and show you guys the web map is the impact that functional class changes might have on the NHS system. So per federal requirements, the NHS should consist of interconnected urban and rural principal arterials and highways. So that's functional classes 1 through 3. So if you have an NHS route that's reclassified from a principal arterial down to a minor arterial or lower, so that would be between functional classes 4 and 7, then we need to be notified and take that segment off the NHS. So just keep in mind, and you'll see in the web map, we've included the NHS layer there for you to reference. So just keep in mind if you're wanting to reclassify a route that's on the NHS, depending on how you're reclassifying it, it might impact its NHS status. And I do want to mention my colleague Bill Rogers, who's on the call, we did a little bit of analysis on our current data, and we took a look at, we compared the functional classification with our NHS routes, and we found about 49 route segments that are coded as a functional class 4 or lower. So technically, we need to look into those and see if that's a coding error on our part, or if at some point those were downgraded and need to come off the NHS. So we'll be looking through those, and we'll be working with you all if they fall within your jurisdiction to get input before we make any decision on that. Oh, I do want to note that this whole functional class change impact on NHS, it doesn't impact intermodal or straw net connectors. So those are allowed to be a lower functional class. So this is just the basic, the overall NHS network. It doesn't include those intermodal connectors or the straw net connectors. Okay, so now I just want to kind of wrap things up by talking about the review procedure and then give a demo of the web map that we're going to be using for this review. So my colleague Bill Rogers, who's helping me analyze our NHS network, also spent a lot of time combing through our functional class data that we have here at ODOT in our database, in our GIS database. And he was looking for minor technical issues and trying to clean up our system a little bit. And so what he did was he identified areas, and we all met and looked at them. Some of you have heard from us with questions we had about some of these situations. So we did try to do a cleanup of our data before we're releasing it to you all to review on your end. So I just wanted to show you a couple examples of kind of those pre-edits and pre-analysis. So down in Hamilton County on River Road, which is County Road 176, we had a situation where the road was changing from a major collector to a minor arterial right before an intersection with ramps that led to US 27. So if you remember that slide, we talked about connectivity and proper connectivity. This is an issue that change should happen at that intersection with those ramps. So that's just a minor change. That could have been a coding error on our part. You know, a lot of changes have happened since we did this review 10 years ago. So we went ahead and updated that. So you can see in the after picture, we corrected that coding to that change of the functional class to happen at the intersection with those ramps. Here's just another example. This is, again, a connectivity issue in Lake County. I worked with Derek Taylor on this one from NWACA, had some questions about how to handle this situation. So in this screenshot from on the map, you can see that Plains Road no longer connects to State Route 283. There's some private development here. There's a McDonald's and some other fast food restaurants that kind of broke up this connection. So technically, this route shouldn't just end here, especially since it's a major collector. If it was a local route, that would be okay. But since it's a major collector, it shouldn't just dead end here. It should connect. So to take care of that, we worked with Derek, and he gave us some input and said, why don't we change that route from the beginning to where it intersects here with Lakeway Boulevard and reclassify that as a functional class 7, and then create that connectivity by adding Lakeway Boulevard to the network as a major collector. So he took a look at the attributes for that road, and that made the most sense. So when I do my demo of the web map, I'm going to use this as my example. All right, so the change request procedure, it's going to be really similar to the procedure we used for the urban area boundary review. We're going to ask you, our stakeholders, to submit change requests via the web map. In the past, for functional class changes, we asked that you submitted a cover letter and a spreadsheet and like a digital map to us. So all of that's going to be replaced with the web map for the review and hopefully going forward. So, we do this big review every 10 years. And, after that big review, we still accept functional class change requests from you all. So we're going to use that web map going forward. The second step is that the ODOT Functional Class Committee will meet and evaluate requests. So that involves some folks that I work with here at Central Office. It also involves a functional class coordinator from each district, and a list of those folks is available on our project website. And then the third step in the process is that we'll schedule a virtual meeting once we've gotten an organization's submissions and have met to evaluate them. We'll reach back out to you and schedule a virtual meeting so that we can ask you any questions we might have about your submissions. And then once a consensus is reached, we'll request documentation from you accepting those changes, just like we did with the urban area boundary review. And then after that, we'll submit our GIS data to FHWA for them to review, reach back out to you if FHWA has any questions. And then finally, we'll get the approved functional class submitted to FHWA with any changes they request and publish that data for you all to consume. Okay, so that's my presentation today. Before I move into the web map demo, does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns at this point? I covered a lot really fast, so yeah, go ahead. Bob, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, Aaron. Those of us that are in multi-state regions, we need to ensure that when we cross boundaries that we try to be as consistent as possible. So
Right.
will the web map, what would the extent of the web maps be?
Well, let's take a look here. Let me open it up here. That's a good question. So when you log on, this is similar to the urban area boundary review where you'll be asked to put in a username and password. This is your My ODOT username and password. So I'll go ahead and log on. Yeah, so currently, obviously, you can zoom out, but the data that we're showing is just Ohio. We're not showing data in neighboring states. And I guess ideally, it'd be great if we could show that. I don't know what stage the other states are in their functional class review, but maybe that's something that I should look into.
Well, we have that layer in our GIS, so I guess, it's not the end of the world. We can use that and assume that it's correct. Yeah, Kentucky's, they're just about ready to get started as well. Indiana, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, well, I know a few folks who are involved in this process. I know I have a contact in Kentucky and West Virginia, but maybe that's something that maybe I could help with, look into, kind of see where they're at in the current review and how to kind of ingest that data into our web map. But that's a good point. I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else before I show the web map? If you think of anything, just interrupt me at any time or type in the chat. So this web map is similar to the one that we used for the urban area boundary review. There's a few differences that hopefully I can show you here in the demo. I really would value your feedback as far as what layers we're including, how we're symbolizing the data, because we can try to think about what you guys might need for your review, but I'm everything. So if you guys have any constructive criticism, feedback, additions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Okay, so as I mentioned, you'll need a My ODOT username and password. If folks are on this call that don't have one yet, I'll be reaching out to you after this meeting with some information about how to get one. It's very easy. So once you're logged on to the web map, it's got all the basic features of a web map. You can zoom out to the default extent. You can zoom in or out. You can look up locations here in this search box here. And then over here on the right, you've got a few buttons. You've got an instruction button that tells you how to use these different tools step by step. And then starting here on the left, you've got your legend here that's showing all the layers. Request layer turned on, and the current functional class, as well as district and county. So over here, you'll see all the different layers that we have. We have the functional class request layer, which is symbolized on kind of its approval status. So hopefully we can do a good job of kind of tracking where it's at in the process. I've also got a layer here for proposed functional class. So in a couple of situations, we have issues with connectivity. And in order to address those, sometimes it might be appropriate to include a proposed route to provide that connectivity. Obviously, we don't want to just start throwing in proposed routes everywhere just to deal with connectivity issues. So, you know, it's probably a good idea if that proposed route is actually going to be built. So maybe on a long range plan or another type of justification that we can give to FHWA saying, hey, this is a legit proposed route and, you know, it's going to, the likelihood of it being built is pretty high. Got the current functional class there. We also, like I mentioned, we have the NHS routes, and I symbolize those with all the different categories. I don't know if that's good or bad. You guys let me know what you think. But as I mentioned, you know, routes on the NHS that are an intermodal connector, like these major port facility, those types of things, they're not impacted by functional class per se. It's just mainly the national highway system and the straw net. So yeah, it gets a little confusing because when you look at the NHS here, you can see all these ramps are just regular NHS where this is a straw net route. So I'm thinking about maybe simplifying the way I'm symbolizing these NHS routes. So we've got district, county, we've got cities as well, and then we've got our urban areas. So these are the latest and greatest urban areas, the 2020 adjusted boundaries. So these are the up-to-date urban areas. And then we've got MPO boundaries as well. All right, so those are our layers currently. Happy to add more, change them based on you guys' feedback. There's also different base maps available. If you want to have imagery or another type of base map, those are available. So as I mentioned, I'm going to use an example from earlier in the presentation for my demo on the tool. So I'm going to turn on my current functional class. All right, I am going to navigate to a location where I know it's close to my area of interest. So that's the John McMinn Memorial Park. All right, so here's that Plains Road that I was showing earlier that we have an issue with the connectivity here. It's cut off by this private development now. So let's say you as a stakeholder comes in and wants to make a submission to update the functional class. You would navigate over here to the functional class change request tool, and this form pops up. The first step to fill out your request form is to click on the route in question. Oh, of course it's going to give me problems because I just tried. Oh, here we go. Live demos, you never know. Okay, so you can see when I clicked on this route, the tool extracts the NLFID, which is the unique identifier we use here at ODOT for each route in our GIS database. And then it provides a begin log and an end log. Now you can see that it automatically inputs the full extent of the route to begin with. And you can change that by dragging and dropping this tool here. So I know from my conversation with NOACA that we want to change the functional classification for this portion of the route from where it begins here to the intersection with Lakeway Boulevard. Okay, so I've got my selection made, my road ID and my log points look correct. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the proposed functional class. So it automatically defaults to principal arterial. In this case, I'm going to want to change the functional class to a 7 to a local route. And then for my begin description, I'm just going to type in, I'm going to copy and paste so you guys don't have to watch me type. But I'm saying here the begin point is the dead end at the private development. And my end description is going to be Lakeway Boulevard. And then I'm putting in LAK for the county. And it's MR 1071H. And you can see we've got those routes labeled if you're wondering what the NLFID is. For my justification, I'm going to copy and paste in there. Be as detailed as you can. In this case, I'm saying that Plains Road begins at an area with private development and no longer connects to Andrews Road, State Route 283. So to ensure proper connectivity, this section of Plains Road is being downgraded to a functional class 7. And then you just fill out your contact info, your submitter name, your email address, your phone number, and then your organization. We should have everybody in here. We've got ODOT here. If you don't see your organization in here, please let me know, but I think we've got everyone. Okay, so once you're happy with that, you can see the date automatically populates with today's date, and then you'll submit that. So that changed now. If we go over to the layers and we turn off the current functional class, you'll see that the functional class change request is there. And I believe you can click on it and you can see the details that we just input. Okay, so when that happens, I also receive an email letting me know, hey, somebody's made a submission, and it gives me some basic information about who submitted it and what's happening so that I can, make a note to go and take a look at it. And you as a submitter should get an email notification as well if everything's working like we think it is. So if you make a submission and you don't get an email confirming that you made one, let me know. Okay, so then the same process would happen here. I'll go ahead and just complete this example. I'll turn back on the current functional class. I'll go back to my tool here. And now I want to update the functional class for Lakeway Boulevard so that we have proper connectivity for this route here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate my change request tool. I'm going to select the route in question. It selected the full extent. In this case, I do want the full extent selected. And I'm going to upgrade this from a functional class 7 to a functional class 5. And my begin description here, again, I'm going to copy and paste so you don't have to watch me type. And then a justification, I'll pop in here. So my justification is that it will provide proper connectivity from Plains Road to State Route 615. Lakeway Road is 2 lanes in each direction and widened to handle the diverted Plains Road traffic. And then there's my name. Unfortunately, you can't tab through these boxes. I always forget. Okay, and then I'll fill out my organization too. And then I'll submit that as well. Okay, so there's my example there. That's input. Let's say you wanted to put in a proposed route. You have plans and your long range plans, you're going to reconnect Plains Road here to this state route. If you wanted to do that, we have a tool called Proposed Functional Class Request. You'll need to have the proposed functional class layer turned on to be able to add something. So you'll see here is the available data item that you can choose. And then you simply draw a line. I'll delete this later. And double click to finish the drawing. And then this form pops up. And what we're trying to get at is what the NLFID might be for this particular route. So this is, in this case, it would be a municipal route. Let's just say Route 1. The route suffix, I don't really think we need this, and I'm going to ask the web map developer to take this out, I believe, because I don't think we really need that one. The proposed functional class, let's say it's going to be a 5. And then again, you'll enter a begin and end description. And you also have the option of attaching a file. So this might be, a page from your long-range plan, adopting that proposed route or proposing that it be built at some point in the future, something like that. That's kind of how we envision this tool being used. I'm not going to finish this because I'm wondering if it's going to add it anyway. But in any case, you have some other fields to fill out. Again, begin and end description, justification, your contact info, and stuff like that. Let's see if I can get away with closing it without saving it. Leave. Ah, shoot, it put it in there anyway. Okay, I'll go and clean that up later. But that's the proposed functional class tool, and you can see it symbolized by a dash line to let us know that it's a proposed route. Oh, I also want to point out you've got this Street View tool as well. If you wanted to take a look at this area, you can use our Street View tool as well. All right, so that kind of covers our web map. It's pretty straightforward, I think. It's pretty, hopefully easy to use. Again, if you guys have feedback or, you think of some more layers that might be useful. We did try to, one thing I didn't show was that we do have traffic counts on there. And this is the data from Tim's. Let me turn this off. We've got those symbolized with green kind of being at the low end and the dark red being higher volumes. So we did include our traffic counts on those on the web map as well. And again, you can see this is from Tim's. So, okay, my colleague is telling me over the cube I have a question in chat. Does the functional class change request tool snap to the existing functionally classified features? Snapping to intersections would be great to, yes, I agree with you. And that's something my colleague Bill Rogers brought up. Currently it does not snap. I'll make a note to see if the developer can add that functionality. But yes, that's a great point, because we want to avoid those situations that I was showing earlier where we have functional class changing right before the intersection. That's an issue. So good question. Anybody else? If not, I will go back to my PowerPoint. Oh, my last slide is questions. All right, so like I said, this web application is new. This is a new way of doing things. This is going to be a learning experience for all of us. If you run into any issues using the web map application, please reach out to me right away and we'll try to get that resolved and fixed. If we can enhance it in any way to help you guys out in your review, please let me know. And yeah, with that, I'll follow up this meeting with an email to all of you who attended with the PowerPoint so that you have those slides if you need them and links. And I'll be in touch just like I was for the urban area boundary. I'll try to provide an update every month or so, letting you know where we're at in the process. Yeah, Bob, go ahead.
Aaron, you had targets that were set by Federal Highway by roadway type or functional class type.
Yeah.
And you showed those for the state. Do we need to worry about them for our areas, or?
We were talking about that internally, and in fact, let me bring up this. Let me see the dashboard. It's going to take a minute to load. But in our Power BI dashboard, my colleague Ethan has it set up so you can filter by county. But the thing is you have counties that are like 100% rural. They don't have any urban areas in them. So obviously they're not going to meet the targets, and so we were thinking, does it make sense to look at it on a regional basis? And I'm not really sure it does make sense. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like spitting in the ocean, I think. For what few changes we'll probably have, it won't really make that much of a difference.
Right, and you can see these numbers are a little bit different. We got some tweaking to do from my slide. This is showing a little bit different percentages than I showed in my slide, but yeah, so I would say no at this point, unless somebody comes to me and says, hey, you could use it in this way. I really don't know if it's of value. So, and also those target ranges from FHWA were developed on a statewide basis. I'm fairly certain. So I don't know at a regional level if it makes sense to kind of try to meet those targets. It might help you see where in your area you could kind of shift things around to maybe add some percentage points to that functional class 6 in urban areas, perhaps. I don't know. But again, in our meeting with Joe Hausman from FHWA, he did say this is just one tool to help folks perform the review. It's not the be all end all, you know, meeting these targets. And if we can kind of explain why we're so low here in 6 urban, which he was already familiar with since he used to work at ODOT, I don't think it's going to be an issue. All right. Okay, cool. Anyone else before we wrap things up? Any questions, comments? Again, follow up with emails if you think of something after about the web map or as you start using it and think of enhancements we can make, just let me know. All right, well, if nobody has any other questions, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about this and look forward to your feedback. Hope you guys have a great day.
Aaron?
Oh, Bill.
Yeah,
Go.
it's before you get off, before everybody else off the line. I know we have until next November to do this, but obviously the quicker you get it in, the better, quicker we can evaluate it and get it, you know, the changes approved and everything. So just a suggestion not to procrastinate.
Thank you, Bill. That is a good recommendation. I know all of you have lots of other, you know, this is kind of not a, well, it should be a high priority for you because there's important things involved like federal funding and all the rest. But I know you all have lots of other responsibilities just like we do. So yeah, the sooner you can do this, if possible, the better for sure. All righty.
Yeah, but there's no sense in putting you guys through that much stress like you had to go through with the urbanized area every couple of weeks, you know, asking people to please get it done. I don't know why it had to take so long, but okay, we'll do our best.
Yeah, well, appreciate everybody's help with that project. I know, yeah, we had some last minute things, but hey, we got it done, and I'm sure the same will happen for the functional class reviews. So, all right, everyone have a great day. Thank you so much.